Also, from a predation perspective, our chickens, when they were in their fenced enclosure, were never were taken by a predator. We actually never had chickens on a free range perspective when we let them out of their enclosure taken by a predator either. But I think that's, a chance of luck. But when they were in their enclosure, when they saw a hawk or some bird fly over, they would immediately run inside. And with the enclosure properly built, you don't have to worry about ground predators. So one thing I also saw mentioned over and over in the comments is reference to chickens are farm animals and should not be in a city. And I think that's a very old-fashioned sentiment. And I think if you look at the trends over the last several decades all over the country, chickens belong in cities. We've seen cities, thousands of cities across our country that allow chickens. Some of the cities that are nearby to us include Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Wausau, Menominee, Sheboygan, Chippewa Falls, Sturgeon Bay, Beloit, New Berlin, La Crosse, Onalaska, and many others. So no one can objectively say that chickens belong, like some child's board book, in the farm category. Chickens are in cities just like dogs, cats, lizards, fish, and all sorts of other animals. I also don't think chickens are some kind of gateway drug to having horses and goats and sheep in the city limits. So I don't think we need to entertain that type of hyperbole as well. Chickens are excellent for insect control. I can tell you I have chronic Lyme disease, and I know many others that have suffered from Lyme disease. Chickens are great for eating ticks and other types of bugs that are dangerous to all of us. Chickens, you can give them your food scraps. You have protein, you have fruit that you haven't finished. They can take care of it. Food waste is a huge problem in our environment, and they're a great way to take care of those food scraps without having to compost them yourself. The quality of the eggs, I can tell you, is far superior to what you get from a factory farm type of chicken. They're often, the yolk is much darker. They're much healthier for you. Also, you can give your eggs away when you have excess, donate them to a food pantry. We've given away lots of eggs, and all of our neighbors and friends have been very grateful for that. Their waste.
And I'm afraid your time is up.
Okay.
But thank you very much. Next, Debbie Canuso. Good, thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Knudsen. I live at 1132 Ridge Road in Marshfield here. And I just came to voice, that we would like to have chickens. We've had chickens in the past. One town we were allowed 2, and we got an egg maybe every 2 days. They don't lay every day. So you don't have 3 a day. That would be wonderful. That would be really nice, but you don't. And we've had chickens in every town that we've lived in. Some towns allowed 2, some allowed 3, some allowed 4. And we've never had a problem. One neighbor didn't even know we had chickens. So we had a fence around our yard, and they were surprised when they saw them because they didn't know chickens were allowed in town. So we had to show them they were. And our grandkids have played with the chickens. They're friendly. They do not smell. They do not smell. I mean, you have to pick up after your chickens just like you do dogs. If someone's got dog poo all over their yard, it's going to smell. And it's going to bring rodents. So, and as far as being just a farm animal, a cat's a farm animal. It's supposed to be in the barn catching mice and rats, but people don't consider that anymore. So, we just came to see and, like I say, voice our opinion. We have never had a problem with fox coming down and taking them. Our chickens' name were Alice and Jaja. And so they were our pets, and our dogs got allowed, along with them. And I think as long as you're responsible, which you need to be with any pet, we have a neighbor whose dog barks quite a bit, and that's annoying. Chickens give just a little, like clucky noise, and that's it. So that's kind of it. I just came to, ask if we could have chickens. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Next, Katie Collins. Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Collins. I live at 905 North Anton Avenue in Marshfield. My husband and I, we moved to Marshfield 5 years ago, and we were surprised when we moved here that chickens weren't allowed, it being such an agricultural area. And almost all our friends and family that live in Wisconsin and other cities and in other states are allowed to have chickens. And what? You can't have chickens in Marshfield? I just think it'd be a great way to make Marshfield a more attractive city to move to for individuals who care about sustainable living. We would love to have a closer connection to our food. I think it's really important for kids to see like where their food comes from. And I think it'd also be a great, I have 3 little kids, soon to be 4, really great learning opportunity for them to see to learn how to take care of animals and just, be more connected to where their food comes from. Also, our family eats lots of eggs. We eat like 3 dozen easily a week. And so we'd love to be able to supplement that. I would even like to propose that if, like, depending on yard size, that more than 4 would be allowed, like up to 8 I've seen in other cities. That would actually help, because even if, 4 chickens are allowed, they don't all lay every day. So, I mean, at peak, they could lay like 28 a week for us, which means we're still supplementing. So I'd like to propose that up to 8 are allowed, again, according to yard size and availability. So, I think it would be a great way to help the residents of Marshfield live more sustainably. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And a young lady came in late. Did you want to make a comment? If you want to come up, yes. And then when you come up, I want you to spell your name for me and then say your address.
Nicole, N-I-C-O-L-E, Stamp, S-T-A-M-P, 707 North Palmetto Avenue in Marshfield.
Okay. And you have 5 minutes.
I believe that we should have the rights to have chickens in our yards, not just for agricultural reasons, because we are a dairy state. But also, I mean, it helps with, like the other person said, with the insects, and the other lady that was just up here showing your kids, the growth that can accommodate these younger generations. They just think that we can just go to the grocery store and that's just it. We buy eggs. We got it. This will show them where we can actually get things. My family is hunters. They know that the venison we hunt for. We know that the beef that we get butchered, comes from a farm. And we actually pick out the cow and figure it out. So they know where their food's coming from. I believe that it's our right as citizens in Marshfield to be able to accrue chickens in our yards, and our groceries are substantially just crazy. I personally live alone. My kids are out of the house, but many of these young individuals here have very young families that are growing up. But it's still, I went to the grocery store today for 1 week for me, and it was $97. And I had to buy eggs. So it would be nice to go in my backyard. And I'm sorry, I'm an animal lover. I got 2 dogs, I got a cat, and it would be fun to go outside. And my dogs are friendly to sit there and have some chickens kind of roaming around, following you around. And it gives a pleasure to somebody. It inspires people. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to make a citizen comment? Citizen comment? Citizen comment? Citizen comments are now closed. Thank you all for being here and making your comments. We're excited to see so many people that showed up because this is your city and we want to hear what you have to say. Number 6, conditional use permit request by Al Nicolai for an exception to the accessory structure area, maximize requirements for the detached garage for properties located at 1415 East 20th Street, parcel 33-07312A, and 1500 Greenacre Drive, parcel 33-07312, zone SR4, single-family resident, presented by Bryce Pembroke, planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So the properties are located near the intersection of Green Acres and East 20th. There are currently 2 properties in question, or 2 subject properties, I should say. So currently they are divided. However, the applicant is looking to sell the vacant property to the neighboring property owner at 1415. And combine the lots, and then the owner of 1415 is looking to construct a garage on the vacant parcel. So the applicant is proposing to construct a 1,182 square foot detached garage. So if the lots are combined, that would bring the total amount of accessory square footage to over 1,500 square feet, because there's already a 576 square foot attached garage on the property attached to the home. So with that, he would be exceeding the allowable accessory structure requirement by approximately 258 square feet. And one thing to mention, they are currently going through the process of combining the lots through a certified survey map that is being currently reviewed by city staff, and so far there's been no issues. So as you can see on the screen, the existing garage would be located off of Green Acres. There's a driveway access, and the proposed garage would be coming off of East 20th Street. The proposed garage is approximately 21.5 feet in height and will be approximately the same height as the principal structure. The garage will be in similar appearance to the principal structure as well. And all of the proposed setbacks and other zoning requirements will be met. Overall, staff didn't really see any issues with this proposal as long as the lots are combined. So here's also an example of what the garage will look like. There will be some masonry at the bottom of the base of the garage. And with that, my recommendation is to approve the conditional use request by Al Nicolai for an exception to the accessory structure area maximum requirements for a detached garage located at 1415 East 20th and 1500 Green Acres Drive with the following conditions. Number 1, minor site plan changes may be administratively approved as long as they still meet zoning code requirements and requirements set forth in this conditional use permit. Number 2, this basically spells out the allowable square footage. So you would be allowed to construct a 1,182 square foot detached garage as proposed for a total of 1,758 square feet of all accessory structures on the property. Number 3, the garage may not be used for commercial purposes, except if the property owner receives approval for a minor or conditional home occupation. Number 4, the subject properties must be combined through a certified survey map. The building permit shall not be approved until the lot is combined. I also included another option, which is to go through a deed restriction, but that would be only if the city could not allow the combination for whatever reason. So we're hoping not to use that second part of going through a deed restriction, but I included it just in the off chance that we have to. So with that, I would recommend approving with the following conditions.
And as we see on the agenda, it is a public hearing, so it is open now to the public. Anybody wish to speak on this matter?
I'm the owner.
Okay. Would you like to come up to the podium?
You're approving it, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. So we will close the public hearing? Yes.
I'll make a
Mr. O'Reilly
motion to
makes the
approve.
motion. And
I'll second.
Mary seconds it. Any other discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 7, conditional use permit request by Meg Helmrich, Realtor Corporation, presenting Marshfield School District to construct pickleball courts and restrooms on the high school property located at 1401 East Becker Road, parcel 33-03197, Zone CD, Campus Development Director, presented Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Marshfield School District is proposing to add pickleball courts to the south of the tennis courts and the accessory structure on the east side of the property. They are also looking to add a small bathroom facility. So the Marshfield High School has a campus master plan. And so any projects that are listed in that campus master plan within a 5-year span can be administratively approved. This project was not listed in the campus master plan. Thus, the school district either had to amend the plan or go through a conditional use permit to review this specific project. The campus master plan has to be updated later on this year, so they will go through with that process. However, they wanted to get this pickleball court project going as soon as possible. Thus, we're here for a conditional use. So the proposed pickleball court will be approximately 8,385 square feet. There will be 4 courts within the pickleball area. And each court will be approximately 20 feet by 44 feet in length. There will also be some on the northeast and southeast side of the pickleball court. There's going to be, and I included in the packet, but not on the PowerPoint, some shade structures as well for the hot summer months. And then the bathroom facility will be located to the northeast of the pickleball courts. There is already existing water and sewer that will connect from Hume. And in terms of parking, they're proposing 12 parking spaces with 1 handicap accessible stall. And so it's considered, a pickleball court is considered to be an active outdoor recreation land use. And in the code, it allows the zoning administrator to suggest how much parking is required. Generally, for a use like this, I suggest 1 parking space per 4 expected patrons. If you assume that all courts are being played by, a 2-person team, that would be 16 people. Thus, 4 parking stalls would be required. I think 12 is plenty, as well as there are tennis court parking spots as well, and then also some street parking. So over here, you can kind of see, or on the screen, you can see in red, this is generally the project area. So it's relatively small compared to the rest of the property. And then there is some tennis court parking to the north in case there are, smaller events or low events. Staff did not see any concerns. There would be a public benefit for adding, recreational opportunities. And pickleball is an extremely fast-growing sport. I've seen courts go up, around across the state, especially in the Milwaukee area. So this is definitely a big trend right now. So with that, the recommendation would be to approve the conditional use request by the school or by Mike Homer, representing the Marshfield School District, to construct pickleball courts and restrooms on the high school property. With the following conditions, any future proposed buildings and or structures not included in the campus master plan exceeding 1,200 square feet require conditional use permit. Please note that the highlighted part was not included in the staff report, but I just wanted to clarify that the intention was if it was included in the campus master plan, it can still move forward administratively. As far as I know, there are likely no projects that fit that description, but just wanted to include it just in case. And then the second condition would be that the campus master plan shall be updated and approved or in the process of approval by August 31st, 2023.
Thank you, Bryce. Once again, this is a public hearing and it is now open. Anybody would like to make any comments, concerns?
I have a couple questions, if we're done with public.
Absolutely, Mary.
Is this going to be a high school sport or considered a part of the high school sports? And if so, are they going to be renting it out to the public as income for the school district? Or is this going to be free for the public to use?
Bryce, do you have any idea? Because obviously there's, Mike is not here, so he can't answer that question.
Is there a representative from the school district there?
Oh, and here he comes. Okay. Thank you.
Nathan Delaney, I'm the athletic director at the high school. The main purpose of the courts is for recreational use within the city and to allow an addition to our curriculum in physical education. And for those benefits, city and student, not, can we foresee it being a sport? It's going to be a while, and likely if that conversation comes up, you'd have to look at probably an expansion, just like Bozen courts were expanded from the middle school, almost 2 decades ago.
Thank you.
So free for public use then?
Oh, excuse me, I have another question.
Free for, okay,
Yep, thank you.
Much like anything else, if someone's trying to make a profit, then there's a fee for it, but that's currently how Bozen courts are rented as well.
And stay there. John?
Yeah, what's the difference between a pickleball court and a tennis court?
The difference,
Yeah.
Definite size. Pickleball courts fit well inside the current structure of a tennis court, and it's played with a different ball and a different.
Yeah, but the court
Different game.
itself. The court itself is much smaller.
It's much smaller.
Okay. Do you fit?
You could probably hurt one tennis court for the 4, I believe. One full tennis court for the 4 across, maybe two.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Thank you. What kind of maintenance is required for these lots? I'm just a little concerned when we're talking about cutting teachers because the maintenance isn't covered at school the way it is. Are we compounding that problem?
While I don't necessarily know that that's a fair question right now, it is not necessarily compounding the issue. We're working to resurface our current tennis courts as part of this project as well, through the fundraising process. And then, like any maintenance thing, there is going to come a point in time where we have to address that as a district or as a community, however that is funded.
Any other comments or concerns? Thank you for being here and answering those questions. That helps a lot. Absolutely. Okay, so public hearing is now closed.
Motion to approve.
John approves the motion. Second by Franklin. Any other comments? Seeing none, please vote. Yes, yay? Yes, yay.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 8, conditional use permit request by Scott Bozen, Bozen Construction representing Sacred Heart to allow a large-scale indoor institutional land use to allow for a building addition for the property located at 1011 South Central Avenue, parcel 33-00217, zoned UMR, urban use mix. Presenter, Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. There used to be the School for Sacred Heart to the south of the existing church, and roughly in that location, but at a smaller scale, they are proposing to have basically a parish gathering hall, essentially, and it would be attached to the church through a hallway. And in the City of Marshfield zoning code, we look at indoor institutional land uses as there's 2 different types. There's a small scale indoor institutional land use and a large scale. And so a small scale is considered to be anything under 10,000 square feet of building. And so with the church and the parish hall, how it's set up currently, it is considered to be small scale. And with this new addition, it will exceed that 10,000 square foot threshold. Thus, it's now considered a large-scale indoor institutional land use, which requires a conditional use in the UMU district. So when the school is there, it's actually considered to be a large-scale indoor institutional land use, but that has been removed a couple years ago. So it kind of reverted back. Now, so we have to go through this process. Ultimately, they are looking at constructing a 6,232 square foot building addition. And it will be a wood frame building. It will generally be used as the parish hall for assemblies and educational purposes. As I mentioned, with this being an addition to the church building, this will increase the total building size to just under 15,000 square feet. And then obviously thus requiring us to go through this conditional use. A couple other things just to kind of go through. They aren't proposing to really add any parking, and the reason for that is, the church traffic only occurs a handful of times throughout the week, and generally most of the time that this assembly hall will be used, it could be after church, whether it's for snacks afterwards or for Sunday school or other types of educational classes. There shouldn't really be too much conflict between the church and the assembly hall. So the parking, it should not be a concern. There will have to be 12 landscaping points added along Central Avenue. That's essentially, I think, 4 small shrubs or 1 large tree. So really not a big concern, but I would ask that that's added to a site plan for final approval if this is approved. And then the other thing to note is that the area to the south of the proposed addition, currently I believe there's like a grassy area with some gravel. I would just, I listed a potential condition, basically just to have it landscaped a little bit, whether it's just adding grass, you can do landscape features, mulching, etc., but that it should be improved from the current state. With that, I didn't really find any concerns with this proposal. This specific, property has been home to the parish for many decades now, and as I mentioned, the school was located here. It's going to be a much smaller version of that, but it will provide a benefit to the parish itself. So with that, and sorry, this is ultimately what it's going to look like from the streets. Here's some other elevations. And then with that, the recommendation would be to approve the request to allow a large-scale indoor institutional land use for the building addition with the following conditions. Number 1, any future proposed buildings and or structures exceeding 1,200 square feet require a conditional use permit. The open space area to the south and west of the addition shall be seeded or sodded with an acceptable maintainable turf grass or other landscape features. Mulch of plantings or planting beds is acceptable provided that such mulching consists of organic and natural materials. Number 3, proposed landscaping shall be added to the final site plan and submitted to the city planner for final approval. A minimum of 12 landscaping points is required along Central Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, we are open public hearing. Anybody would like to make any comments or have any questions? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And we need a motion and a second.
I'll make a
Alderman
motion
O'Reilly
to approve.
motions. And John seconds. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Rezoning request number 9. Rezoning request by City of Marshfield to rezone the property located at 1901 South Central Avenue, parcel 33-03532C to PUD planned unit development. This parcel was recently rezoned to community mixed use planned unit development instead of the intended zoning district. Presented by Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. So back in August of 2022, the Plan Commission reviewed and approved a rezoning request to rezone the subject property from CMU Community Mixed Use to CMU PD Community Mixed Use Plan Development. So the issue with this is that there is technically no zoning district that's recognized as CMU PD. This was essentially assuming that this was an overlay district, an overlay zoning district, and we do not recognize plan development as an overlay district, but instead as it's a standalone district. So traditionally an applicant would request a rezoning to plan development, and then through the plan unit development review process, which is going to be the next item that we talk about, you would set basically the zoning requirements. So essentially what was intended at the August 2022 meeting was to rezone this to, plan development with using mostly the CMU requirements as a guiding, framework for what would be approved or, approved during the plan unit development process. It just was incorrectly labeled, I suppose. So ultimately, it's pretty much the same. I included the link for the original request just in case people, weren't on the Plan Commission or don't quite remember. But essentially what this is doing is it's correcting the zoning district to make it a plan development, which means that we can review the general development plan for this mini golf proposal for the next item, once this is corrected. So as you can see here, the properties to the north and south are all zoned CMU, and then the subject property should have been just planned development, which is separate from the CMU. And then there are single-family SR6, single-family residential to the east. But with that, the recommendation would be to approve the rezoning request to rezone the property to planned development in order to correct this mistake.
Thank you, Bryce. Once again, public hearing is open. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. With this being rezoned, is that going to delay construction? I mean, from originally when we passed it back in August?
No, so they're currently going through the general development plan. It will be the next item on the agenda, and then they would have to go through a specific implementation plan. So they're not quite ready for the approval process stage quite yet. So this is actually probably the best timing to fix this issue. That way we can do it concurrently.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second? John and Mary. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I promise this is the last public hearing of the evening. General Development Plan Request by Benjamin Austin, representing Hole in One Mini Golf, to review and approve the proposed mini golf course for the property located at 1901 South Central Avenue, parcel 33-03532C. Improperly zoned, community mixed use plan unit development, but in the process of being rezoned to PD plan development. Presenter, Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. So this project probably sounds familiar. It is located across from the Vandahay Aquatic Center on South Central Avenue and also near the new Marshfield Utilities addition. So there is kind of some progress in this area. And the applicant is looking to add a mini golf course to the site. And it was previously zoned for community mixed use, and with what they're proposing, it just wasn't gonna, the layout of the project would not lay out with the current, the CMU zoning requirements. So staff at the time back in, last summer, talked to them about doing a plan unit development, which allows for some flexibility. But then the Plan Commission can require, greater aesthetics, more landscaping, and maybe some other improvements that might be necessary. So ultimately, they are proposing to add a 18-hole mini golf course to the site. And as you can see here, The bulk of the course would be towards the back of the property on the east side. And then to the west, it would be the parking lot and driveway. They are proposing 10-foot setbacks. This would be for basically the edge of the mini golf activity area. It would not be allowed to go any closer than 10. With that, I do want to mention the land use that the mini golf course falls under is intensive outdoor recreation land use. And this is generally a conditional use in the CMU district. And some of the additional requirements that are, added on to an intensive outdoor recreation land use include a buffer yard with a minimum opacity of 1.0. And I kind of provide some numbers in the staff report of the landscaping points that would be required. And they would also need to have a vinyl privacy or a privacy fence along the east property line, which is where residential properties are. They are proposing to add that. But one of the other things I wanted to mention is typically in the CMU, they would have to have all activity areas would need to be a minimum setback of 100 feet from any residentially zoned property. So this is kind of why they're going through the plan unit development. 100 feet from the residentially zoned property puts you about in the parking lot area. So it would not be feasible for what they are proposing. The other thing to just mention about that is the intensive outdoor recreation land use is it kind of lumps together a number of, intensive outdoor recreation uses. So mini golf is considered the same as a racetrack, fairgrounds, amusement park, etc. So some of those kind of have higher noise levels and, higher attendance levels than a mini golf course. So that's just one thing to consider. Yes, there's a 100-foot requirement typically. However, mini golf isn't quite as intense as some of the other land uses that it was considered to be similar enough to. They are proposing 10 feet, so they would still be 10 feet from the property lines. There would be a fence and landscaping, but I just wanted to kind of go over that information. The comprehensive plan, the future land use map, categorizes this property as being transitional mixed use. So the ideal land uses in this area include a mixture of some medium to high density residential, mixed use development, and then some commercial properties. And generally this whole area along South Central is also transitional mixed use. The plan development consists of only one parcel. So this is kind of different than most plan unit developments. A lot of, for example, Prairie Run is another plan unit development in Marshfield that includes, 40 to 50 lots essentially, where this is just one small lot. It is approximately 50,500 square feet or 1.159 acres. And they are looking to also have a small concession and admission building here. So to the west of the, to the southwest and north of the golf course would be the building. Let's see. Parking. So intensive outdoor recreation land uses generally require one space per 4 expected patrons at maximum capacity. During the development review team meeting, the applicant stated that the capacity for patrons actively playing mini golf is 108 people, which would be 6 people per hole, and 125 for the total site. So taking the 125 for the total site calculation, that would mean that approximately 32 parking stalls are required, unless the Plan Commission grants an exception to this requirement. The current proposed parking goes 34 spaces. I do want to note that this could change. There will be a stormwater management plan required for the site because it disturbs more than 1 acre of property, as well as they did not include any landscaping islands within their parking plan, which is generally required every 12 parking stalls. That can also be exempted from the Plan Commission if they wish, but generally there would have to be one stall on each side that's dedicated to being used for landscaping. So this 34 proposed parking spaces will probably be reduced at some point. I estimated that about 28 parking stalls should be sufficient, but that should be up to the plan commission to decide. And then landscaping. So they are proposing to add a vinyl fence along the east side of the property line, and then they would also need landscaping requirements. Now in the CMU district, generally they would be required to have 133 landscaping points along the eastern property line. But for the intensive outdoor recreational land use, they are typically required to have 668 landscaping points with a 6-foot fence along the eastern property line. So for those of you that aren't too familiar with the landscaping points, 40 landscaping points is equivalent to a large tree. Medium trees are 20 points. I think large shrubs are 5. So they can do a combination of different types of landscaping along that eastern property line to meet that requirement. Generally, they should also be 50% coniferous as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, determined at tonight's meeting, but during the SIP, we'd want a more specific landscaping plan, and we would want to list how many landscaping points should be required. 668 is generally the most that would be required, but with it being a PUD and you guys giving some flexibility, if you choose to approve, you can, require 700 landscaping points or more, depending on, however you guys want to go about it. As I mentioned, stormwater management, there will be a plan that will need to be submitted to the Director of Public Works, and this final plan and design should be submitted as a part of the specific implementation plan submittal. Another thing to mention is, let me go back here. Since the property is located in close proximity to the pool, and it's kind of a similar use that is kind of tailored towards, families and younger populations, it has been discussed that a crosswalk should be installed and paid for by the developer. So this is something that the developer will work with the Director of Public Works to figure out what type of signage should be used, where it should be located. But this is to address any safety concerns for people that are going to walk, across from South Central Avenue, which, can see pretty, heavy traffic counts, especially during certain hours. So the staff report kind of goes into greater depth on some of what's proposed and then some of the requirements that I have to discuss for the general development plan. But we'll kind of go through the slides here and show this is generally what they're proposing. They're going through a company that does, mini golf courses across at least the state, and I think just in the region. So it will be pretty packed in compared to, some mini golf courses, but with the site constraints, this is what they're going to end up proposing. And then there will be driveway access off of South Central Avenue, where there would also be landscaping required along the street and the parking areas. And then this is just generally kind of how it could look along the residential properties. And then there will be a chain link fence that would be along the non-residential properties. So I believe to the north and to the west. There would be some, fencing around the mini golf area. There was a lighting plan that was proposed and included in your packet that would have to meet basically any regulations in our lighting plan or lighting code, and would be reviewed as part of the specific implementation plan. And then I do believe that the applicants are there, so they can, I would ask them to kind of go over what they're proposing, project overview, when they're looking to start, expected number of, customers each day. But before that, I would just like to mention the next steps. So if approved, the general development plan will be forwarded to the Common Council and 2 readings of the proposed ordinance will be held. If the common council approves the general development plan, the developer will submit their specific implementation plan, which provides more in-depth information and plans. The specific implementation plan, or SIP, is reviewed by the Plan Commission and then ultimately approved or denied by the common council. I did not give a recommendation. However, I did just want to note that the applicant will need to prepare, more specific site plan and landscaping plans in greater detail and clarity prior to moving forward to the specific implementation plan review. So that's all that I have, but the applicant might be able to kind of speak a little bit more on what they're proposing or to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Bryce. And we'll open the public hearing. Gentlemen, if you'd like to step up to the podium.
I do have a question, of course.
How about if we let him explain first, Sherry? Is that okay? Thank you.
So just start with the general idea of the
Yes,
process
yep.
and everything. Okay. Benjamin Austin. I'm at 1113 Onstad Drive here in Marshfield. We're proposing a 18-hole golf course to go across from Bandahay Waters. We picked that property for obvious reasons. Bandahay Waters has attracted a lot of people into the area. And with the kind of with Rose Bowl closing down and everything as far as ability for children to go out and have activities with their families, this was an ability to do something that me and my wife personally love, as well as many people that we've talked to in the community as well. So we're proposing the 18-hole mini golf course with the water feature. There will be a 4-foot height kind of at the top of the where the water is, and then it kind of works its way gradually down to give itself a little bit of element to that. And Bryce said too, there will be a clubhouse with a with sort of an overhang shade area for concessions and such as pizza and like vending machine type snacks and sodas for the children and families, and then as well as he didn't quite say, but there's a patio area as well with kind of some outdoor seating for afterwards in which to enjoy those things too. The reason that we have it the way that it's set up is that the parking, I mean, we couldn't really have the course itself in the front end, because then we would have to figure access points for the parking to get towards the back. So that's the main reason that we have it set up the way that it is. And then on top of that, it is a little bit tight through that area as well, but it does have plenty of space in that area for fire access. We discussed at the DRT meeting that with the scale that we have, it is enough access through there. We also will have, it's going to be 100% ADA accessible. The company did, note that it had to be 9 holes, but Andy and I decided that all 100% ADA accessible across, and then again, that's easier for the fire access for any concerns, that we have with that too. So, and then overall, we have been talking at the DRT meeting. We did talk with Tom Turchi about the requirements that we would have with the crosswalk and anything that we needed to do to ensure the safety of the children crossing, which will undoubtedly happen from business to business. So,
Thank you.
Anything I missed on that?
First off, let me just say, I think this is a great thing for families in the city, and especially growing the south end of town. I was just thinking though, when it was mentioned before, that the way it would be zoned would be similar to like a fairgrounds or a racetrack. So the fair goes a week a year. So the neighbors around those areas, put up with it a week a year. This is going to be something that's in business all the time. So are we going to have like decent hours of operations for the neighbors and, loud music, things like that? What's your plan kind of surrounding all of that?
Personally, I think it's slightly unfair to be wrapped in with a racetrack
I agree 100%.
and a fairground.
It makes you think, right?
I thought it was a little funny the first time that it happened that we had to have a rezone for that particular reason. Because I live on the west side of town, but I'm probably 5 miles away from the racetrack and can hear it when they have them on the weekends.
Yeah.
So it's not our intent to have loud music blaring over the speakers. They're not even going to be above the 6-foot area. What we kind of have envisioned is to have like a speaker rock, to kind of give it a little bit of ambiance, but it's not going to be, it's just going to be a kind of to keep, fun atmosphere and just in lower volume. It's not going to be anything that's going to be wild. As far as hours go, we totally intend on being cognizant of the neighbors. During the week, we plan on closing around 9 p.m. And then on weekends, probably around 10 p.m. So, which I think both covers the area of quiet time for everybody. As far as year-round goes, it won't be year-round because it is going to be an outdoor mini golf course. There won't be any enclosure on it whatsoever. So it's really dependent on our lovely Wisconsin weather. So, which means we could start as early as April and we could go as long as November is kind of probably the zone that we're thinking, with a little bit of leniency depending on just kind of what happens that year. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I guess I'd like to say thank you for investing in the community, and this is a great thing for our community. Second, I'm looking for your input. Mr. Hembrook had mentioned possibly reducing parking stalls. I guess I'd be looking for your input on that. Would that be a logical thing to do, or what are your feelings on it?
I mean, I guess it's just going to be a little bit more of discussion with that as well. I mean, Andy and I, we threw the 125 number out there in the sense of like, if it was full bore, 6 people on every hole, 20 people out in the patio area, concession areas, and that the possibility of that happening is there, I suppose, maybe on weekends. But in general, I think you're going to have most holes have 4 or 2 or something of that nature. So, I mean, it's realistically going to be more like in that 70 to 80 range, which would require much less. I think I did the math on it, would be more like 18 spots. If it was 72, it would actually be 18 spots. So with that being said, I think that we'll kind of find maybe that sweet spot in there. And that way, if there is necessary need to do more landscaping within the parking lot or any of that nature, that's something that we'd be open to doing.
Anyone else? I do have a question, and you probably can't answer this, but how many neighbors are in your area? Do you have any idea?
Like where I live, or
no, where the mini golf will be.
Oh, it's 5 of them that actually touch the
back end,
the property lines themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, you'll have the fence up and yep. Okay.
Yep. So it's a vinyl, so that it wouldn't be completely opaque. And then that was an example of the kind of the arborvitae that we were thinking that we'd put for just a little extra boundary on that.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Yep.
Do you have a construction timeline?
Well, I mean, as soon as everything is approved, I mean, we've been working diligently with the mini golf course company. Mm-hmm. The average time for them to do it is 21 to 28 days. So yeah, they're pretty efficient. So they're a company out of Michigan, actually, so they are pretty much right in our backyard, but they do work all over the Midwest. And so they're ready to go when we are, so to speak. So, and then everything kind of needs to fall in place after that, because obviously this is an empty parcel, and so we would need to do a fence, but we have all the quotes from all the fencing, excavation, the mini golf course itself, obviously, and then the parking lot. And so we are pretty much all set to go.
So with the fencing, there'll be a way to secure the entirety of the actual mini golf course.
Correct.
It's not open, right?
Yeah, so the white vinyl fence is taller in the back, and that's all for the privacy of the residential area back there, as well as the arborvitae. And then along the property line of Fedek and Goodwin is just kind of that one edge line right there where the building stops. If you kind of see it on the map there on the south side, we're 4-foot fence there just to make sure that, there's keeping the children there and families. And then where you see the east, the northwest side, and then the all along the northwest side of the L as well, where the parking lot is, will be also a chain link fence to just keep everything corralled within that area.
So you'll be able to have it like closed off so nobody can get in when you're not open.
As far as, I guess, what the parking lot goes, that would be like the one access point that you could get into. But I mean, we weren't really on that thought process.
They'll be able to get into the parking lot, but that's not really a problem. I'm concerned about your mini golf course itself.
Sure. I mean, if it really is a concern, we would, if we need to put up some sort of barrier to go on, along with the parking lot, I think that, that would be something we would want to do too. So
it's going to be your structure, so I guess you'll have to figure that out. I think this is great.
Yes, thank you very much. Barring any other discussion, we will close the hearing. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming and giving us all the explanation that we need. And again, thank you, yes, for bringing somebody to the south end that's going to whip us up. Exciting, definitely. Okay, and I need a motion. Motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Kim. Any discussion?
I have a question. So,
Yes, sir.
So Bryce didn't really include like how he normally does, or we've got like all these conditions along with the approval. Do we need to construct a motion that sort of covers the points like the crosswalk and the landscaping, and we've got to really dig into that, don't we?
Bryce?
So, and I can kind of touch on that. So with the GDP, it is kind of, that initial phase. So you don't necessarily have to have all these conditions laid out. I would probably, if you would recommend to approve, you would recommend to approve the general development plan as presented, with the condition that they, have all of the items prepared for the specific implementation plan. That's pretty much all you really have to say. We will be requiring, the crosswalk, the landscaping plans, the lighting plans. That will be required as a part of the municipal or the zoning code requirements for the SIP. So you don't necessarily have to state things one by one. But I will have during the SIP, if this moves forward, I will have a list of conditions ready to go for that next meeting.
Thanks for the clarification, Bryce.
Yes, Steve.
Would that be okay? I'll just say it this way informally. Would that be okay to whoever made the motion in the second? I believe it was Mike and was it John? Were you this? Kim was the second. With that understanding of what he means by a condition at the tail end of that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So we'll vote.
Yep. So we need to vote. All those
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, gentlemen. The next step in mini golf. Item number 12, discussion and possible action regarding on municipal code amendment request by the city of Marshfield to review a purposed ordinance to allow chickens on single-family lots. The proposed changes would amend section 9.52 to include language on licensing requirements and adding a new section that describes the new chicken regulations. The proposed changes will also add language to Chapter 18 zoning code to allow backyard chickens as an accessory use permit by right in the single-2 family residential districts and the agricultural zoning district, and establish backyard chickens as an accessory land use. The proposed changes will also include an exception from a fence permit for chicken pens, presented by Bryce Hembrook.
Thank you. So I don't really have anything much to add from the last meeting. I believe that Steve will kind of go over some of the survey results that we had conducted by our communications director. But I just wanted to note again that in the staff report, I included a proposed amendment that was prepared by the previous city planner. If you are ready to move forward, there is language kind of prepared, or you can, kind of take a look at what could be adjusted. But you don't necessarily have to vote on, this proposed amendment today. If you don't feel like it, but it is provided. And then there is also information regarding what some of the other communities do. So I believe I included information from Wausau, Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids, and Eau Claire. And then, so any of that information on the proposed amendment or the neighboring community, or sorry, nearby communities, that has not changed from the last meeting. But Steve, I will hand it to you, I guess, to kind of talk over the survey results.
Thank you, Bryce. Yeah, I want to start out by thanking Tom Laux, our communications director. He did an outstanding job on this project, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But at the April 18th meeting when this issue was discussed, the commission did direct that there be a really active and aggressive, if you will, effort to try and get public comment and feedback on the proposed ordinance. So in working with communications director Tom Laux, he brought out all the different platforms we use. You know, we have a number of platforms like a Facebook, website, all these things. But also he used a new tool called Public Input. This is a software we've got tied in recently that allows us to conduct surveys. And you're going to see a lot more of these on behalf of the city and for the council and others with respect to how people feel about our services, how they feel about, you know, taxes, how they feel about amenities, whatever it is. We'll get the input from what people are thinking and share it as these discussions are being held. So this particular instance, we had, believe it or not, 3,135 responses to the survey. Now you say, well, we only have 19,000 residents. One of the things that Tom had to do when he's done some work on is trying to nail down how many of those are specifically from Marshfield. And that doesn't mean that we're not concerned with people in the surrounding area, people who live just outside the city limits, and others who have concerns about topics in this community. Some of them may have been farther away than that. We tried to filter those out as best we could, but this is a real sense of how people view about the issue. So just touching on the results real briefly, 3 questions were asked. The first one was, I am interested in housing chickens on my property. 55% said yes, 40% said no, and 6% said undecided. Doesn't add up to exactly 100%. These are rounded. But that's what we got in terms of how people responded to that question. Another question was, if permit guidelines are created to house backyard chickens, what considerations are important to include? 78% said the number of chickens, 75% said cleanliness, 67% said hens only, 44% said location on the property, 33% said permission from their neighbors, and 30% said no selling of chickens, and 23% said visibility to the general public. The final question was a response, yes or no. I am comfortable having my neighbors house chickens on their property. 60% said yes, 40% said no. There were an incredible number of comments. You've seen them. For those in the audience or those who might be watching at home, you can see this online, this entire memo that I just read, plus all the responses, 30 pages total. You can find that in the agenda packet for tonight's meeting. And it's a good sense of what some of the concerns raised and some of the positive things being said about allowing chickens in the community. The cutoff for the comments that you have in your packet was Friday. That's when the agenda packet went out. And the survey results continue to come in. You can see those online. But we did also take emails. And I got 3 emails from people who either got them in a little bit late or indicated that they weren't going to be available to come tonight. Since this is a public hearing, ultimately, I trust I can start by reading these. First one is just a little input on the proposed chicken ordinance. I have children living in Loveland, Colorado, where chickens are allowed. Because many of the city lots are small and close together, the neighborhoods are all fenced off to allow the chickens to free range. This brings chickens right up to the property line. Chickens have also caused the neighbors who don't have chickens to fence in their properties so they don't have to look at a chicken coop and fowl just beyond their back door. I don't think most people realize how the flow of neighborhoods are affected once fences go up. Do we want more fences in Marshfield? Also, does a budget-strapped city have time to handle the additional nuisance complaints? Thanks for listening. And that's signed Monty Wilcom, 2401 Meadowbrook Drive in Marshfield. The next one is from Becky Spencer. Becky lives at 2204 West 3rd Street in Marshfield. I apologize for the last minute email, but I want to express my opposition to backyard chickens within the city limits of Marshfield. We live in a rural community and are only minutes away from homes and farms outside of the city limits. If a person would like to have chickens or fresh eggs, the opportunity is already readily available. When choosing to live within the city limits, there are expectations of what would be found in a neighborhood. Chickens do not fall within those expectations. Moreover, the city would have to deal with the enforcement of the backyard chicken ordinance. Thank you for seeking citizen input on this matter. And again, that's Becky Spencer from 2204 West 3rd Street. The final one I'm going to read is from Gordon Adler, who lives at, I thought I saw his address, but he is a resident of Marshfield. I'm not seeing it at the moment.
He lives at Cedar Rail.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is Gordon Adler, CPA. I am in favor of the chicken ordinance passing in the city of Marshfield. As I understand it, all the neighbors that are bounded by your property must sign off that they agree to allow you to have chickens. With this type of strict requirement, besides having to go through all the hoops of getting permits, et cetera, I am in favor of this ordinance. I would also be in favor of having 6 chickens instead of 4. I've seen a number of city ordinances, and the ones I see were all 6. I realize we still need to dispose of chickens, and if we work hard enough, we will find a place to put them. In watching the meetings on this subject, it appears that in the future, there may be state legislation on this subject. Several months ago, I checked out various cities, and I was surprised how many had chicken ordinances. And again, that's Gordon Adler. We received one other letter that was dropped off. It's in some information I put out here for you today, the Plan Commission, on your desks. It is available if somebody else wants to get a hold of this, but I'm not going to read it because it's not signed. It's anonymous. There was nothing on the envelope and nothing in the letter that identifies the person. And if you go to the podium, you would have to name who you are and give your address. So I won't be reading that one. Those are the things that I've received either late or that were respectfully to be required or to read. I'm sorry, people who are not here this evening.
As this is a public hearing, anybody else wish to make any comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And Plan Commission, what is your pleasure? As Bryce said, we can vote or we don't have to vote on this evening.
Is I basically would almost like to hear from our ordinance officer. No? No? I would like to understand a little bit about what the city's thinking on maintaining this. The other thing too is on some of the city ordinances that I read that are not ours, there wasn't anything about having to get your neighbor's permission.
Oh, there is definitely. You have to get all your neighbors that, yes, so
In
your
every
backyard is
city?
here. Yep, you have to get everybody's permission that is in your backyard to, if you only get one that says no, it's not gonna happen. It doesn't matter if there's 5, and the 4 say yes, it has to be all of them. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I believe
Yep.
that's correct. Is it not, Bryce? Anybody abutting the subject property?
I believe that's correct.
Yes, for the proposed, and then I believe that the comment that was made was that the other cities did not have that.
Not all of
And
them
I'm
do.
just taking a look, and not all of them. I did see a couple where at least we had to provide basically written notification.
Yeah, that was kind of a little concern for me. Not all neighbors are neighborly and,
Correct.
what do we, to me, that's gonna increase the city problem if we have to get permissions type thing.
That was a discussion that was held at the last meeting also.
Was it?
There were some concerns over
Unfortunately,
that.
I missed-
Yeah, no, there was concerns over that as well, because if you have one person who doesn't like you, they're obviously not going to sign off on it. It's a proposal, I guess. We'll leave it at that. It's up to perhaps you guys to, you guys don't make the decisions on changing that. I would believe that would go to the council for their,
Correct.
and then.
We bring
yeah.
it before the council with a vote, yes or no. Yep.
I think without making you go through what you did last month, Bob, I mean, I think a lot of the issues have been talked about tonight, whether, enforcement is going to be tricky, those kind of things. And I know you brought up the last time you were here what to do with apprehended, if you will, for lack of a better term, chickens. That's something that hasn't been discussed tonight either. I don't know if you want to touch on any of that.
I still don't have a solution for it. Actually, I'll back that up. I actually might have a solution for it. But that solution is in Chippewa. There's a duck chicken rescue over there. But that would entail us going there,
Driving.
which I think is a strap on city resources for us to be doing that. I'm hoping we don't have a stray chicken issue, but you never know.
Yes.
Am I on? Yes. Has a study been made on like the issue of resources and ordinance officers here? Has any kind of study been made on the cost benefit for the city? I don't know what the benefit would be, but the costs in relation to current resources. $35 income per chicken owners. Anybody was anything in the surveys done is a projection, like 55% said they would be interested in having chickens, had to reduce that by a certain percentage because of neighbors saying no, so on and so forth. So any projections on income versus cost of the ordinance officers going around checking to see if the square footage is correct, if they have the proper shed, if they, so on and so forth. Any kind of analysis been done on that?
Not that I'm aware of. And of course, the big question beyond just an initial inspection is how many calls will there be where there's a complaint that, something is not going the way it's supposed to, that they are getting out or that they're being not cared for, they're not being cleaned up after. It'd be pretty hard to know or anticipate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do any of the other municipalities that allow the chickens have anything, have they done any analysis over the last few years as to what it has cost them as opposed to the income from licensing fees? Is it a break even? Anybody had anything to say about that? No?
We don't have any information on that, but then I don't believe we've even brought that issue up with anybody. So whether they've done any analysis of that, I'm not sure. Some of them are fairly recent into this game, I think, in the last few years. So whether they've got enough data to make that calculation, I'm not sure. What we heard, and I think this came out of the last meeting last month, is that the biggest concern is probably not the people who come forward and do the right thing. In other words, they come in, they get the permit or the license, they abide by the regulations. When you check them out, they've got the right size coop, they care for the animal. The bigger concern is people who might hear that suddenly chickens are allowed in the city of Marshfield and they just bring in chickens, and they don't abide by the rules, they don't get a permit, they just think it's suddenly open season, so to speak, to have them. I think that's what we heard is maybe where some of the complaints have come in places like Wausau and Stevens Point. But again, I'm not aware of a cost benefit or a financial calculation on how this is working out.
I'm sorry, the one thing I didn't quite understand, one thing you were saying was, you're saying that is a problem in these other cities, that people bring in chickens, don't get a license, aren't really being compliant.
Well, what we've heard anecdotally, and I think Bob, you might have said this at one point, we definitely had somebody else who made some calls and made this comment. Their experience, and again, please correct me if I'm misquoting this, okay, to your best of your knowledge, Bob, but the issues where it's come up in these other cities around us has not been with the people who come in, probably some of the people in this room who might want to have chickens who follow the rules, get the license or permit, build the correct coop, right. Clean up regularly, do all the rules. The more likely people that they struggle with are those who don't do that. And probably the same now with dogs, care of the dogs. People, you probably find out that the people who aren't licensing their dogs are the same people whose dogs might be running loose or whatever. It has to do with the responsibility level of the individual. It's my best guess.
And if you want to get really picky, there's people that don't have license for their bicycle. I mean, it all stems back from that same thing. Well, I didn't know I had to have a license for that, Right. I just heard about this chicken thing and this is great, and it's ignorance is not the answer, but yet sometimes it is, unfortunately. And as far as the study, I'm going to guess that most people I shouldn't say don't care about that, but they're just looking at it because they want chickens in their yard, right? Yeah. That's basically what it's about. That's what I've been hearing and seeing the emails and stuff. Once they get the initial cost paid for, then like the family that has 4 children, the eggs, great for them. you know, because it helps supplements their income. Just like I said, listening to people, that's kind of, I know it's a little weird, but that's kind of how the trend seems to be going, if that is fair to say.
Yeah, and this is going away from your question again, for which I apologize, but if you look at some of the emails and the comments that we've gotten on social media and the public input survey that's been done, you know, there's a lot of great points on all sides, but one of the points that's made by some people against allowing chickens is they'll say, and I've read this many times now, that my neighbors don't take care of their dogs. Why would I expect them to properly care for their chickens? Almost like they're expecting the worst based upon what they're seeing from some of their neighbors. So, I mean, I think those are the kind of people that Bob and Kayla and the city in general are going to have to deal with. And we just don't know how many of them there'll be and how much time it'll take to address those concerns.
The majority of the people who have talked to me over the past month, the reason for having chickens is because of economy. It's good for them to have chickens and have the eggs, so they don't have to pay for them. I went on a complaint last week, I guess, to kind of solidify a little bit of something. Somebody had ducks and chickens in town. They do. They didn't know there was an ordinance prohibiting that.
Mm-hmm.
They no longer have chickens and ducks in town. Confirm that today. They are very responsible people. I believe that they're going to probably get chickens if that is permitted. But there's a lot of people out there that we probably don't even aren't aware of that have chickens and quite possibly ducks. But their reasonings were very interesting and understandable as to why they want ducks or chickens. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to sit up here and say we're going to have an influx of problems when it's really not my place to say that we're going to, because I don't know. And we talked about that a month ago too. And I think John brought up a very interesting question is like, how, of all the dogs that we pick up that go to the shelter, how many of those are licensed when they come to pick them up? And the answer is hardly any of them. So it's a learning curve for everybody. It's unfortunate. It's a state law to have dogs licensed, but it's going to be a city ordinance to get the proper paperwork to do, to have coops and chickens.
So I think I'll just end my comments by saying that I think the vast majority of people who will get chickens will be responsible. I think they're good people who want to do the right thing. There'll be some people who won't do that, and the question is how many of those will be, and who knows.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things. I do have somewhat of a concern about two of the obstacles for this, one being the neighbor's approval for some of the reasons that were mentioned. But what do we do in a situation when a home is sold and a new person comes in? Can they vote against it and they have to get rid of their chickens after they could have had them for several years? I mean, there's a lot of ramifications for that, and not only, I guess even financial ramifications to the people that had them and were operating legally. The other one that I have to question the motive on it is the sale of chickens. From what I understand, it's only hens, so you're not going to have offspring. And if you're only allowed to have, for instance, 4, how are you selling chickens? I think that could be a big fix for what Bob had brought up about we don't know what to do with them if they're collected. Are other people willing to buy them from them? I mean, that could resolve some of that problem. Some people that maybe lost some chickens, not lost in the community, but lost them to a disease or something else, they could take them. They could pay $1 for them. I mean, I don't understand that restriction because it doesn't seem like it would really apply to anything. With a limit of 4, they would have to break the rules to be able to have multiple chickens to sell. So, I mean, they'd already be breaking the rules. And I guess the other part that I would say is, you know, one thing that's been happening a lot in this country is there's restrictions put on people that are doing things legally and properly because of the actions of irresponsible people. And I could not disagree with the way things are working that way. You're punishing the public that is responsible for the actions of a few. And I guess that would lead me to the question is, what are the ramifications if someone breaks this? Is there fines involved? I mean, if you put a significant fine on something like this, word's going to travel real quick in the chicken community. if they got some problems going on. So I would offer that out for consideration if it's not already in there. And that's all I have.
That first question is very interesting because the chief of police asked me about that today and I could not answer that question. So I don't know what happens if somebody moves. Are they going to be required to get that person's signature, or do they move into the house thinking that, well, this is the way it is, this is just the way it's going to be?
I think that's a dangerous zone to go into.
I think it is too.
I think if you're buying a house, you understand the situation that you're buying into.
Yeah.
I always thought if you're just renewing a license, and once you've got it, you know, but again, I need to look this up because I haven't been looking at this very much. But
Yeah.
that once you're there, if you're just renewing it, you know, annually or whatever you have to do to keep in good standing, you know, no one's going to force you out of it by moving in there that didn't like it. I would think, but we need to verify that. I do want to touch on the other thing, because I do agree, and I generally don't express my opinion in these scenarios, Mike, but I do agree with you that I think it's a bit harsh to require that all your neighbors are agreement. You know, again, I think I brought this up at the last meeting. Some people have basketball poles in their driveway that other folks find unsightly. And so you might have 4 people who say, yeah, have a basketball pole and let your kids shoot baskets. And somebody might say, I don't like the way that looks. Or I don't like to hear a basketball bounce once in a while. That's a pretty difficult hoop to get through for some people who maybe have one neighbor who isn't fond of them. But that's the way it's been written up, and I understand why it's been written up that way. I'm not arguing with how it was drafted, because I know that the idea is we want this to be a good thing. We don't want people to be unhappy with their neighbors back and forth. But that is a bit strong.
Yep. No, I'm going to add to that by saying I'm not sure I want chickens. I hadn't even thought of it, to be quite honest, of raising chickens. But I have one neighbor, and then my other touch points would be the city of Marshfield property. So what happens there? Right?
You have one neighbor.
Yeah.
So as
So
long
it's
as
not
they,
going to be a city of Marshfield.
yeah, right.
Okay.
Yep, correct. Yep.
Yeah, no, that would be my understanding as well.
Yep.
And if I could just touch on one thing.
Sure,
Mayor. Okay. One of the things to just mention too is, you know, with preparing this ordinance, as I mentioned, I didn't quite write this, but this is kind of a team effort as far as I understand from last year. One of the things that we kind of do when we present some changes like this is kind of think of any and all provisions that might make sense to include. For example, the neighbor approval. You know, when we're proposing this, it's not necessarily saying, yeah, we absolutely should do this, but consider this. This is something that other communities do. If you guys agree with it, let's keep it. If you guys don't like it, let's, you know, exit from the proposal. So I think that, you know, having the neighbors all agree doesn't necessarily have to be included, but we do usually try to like to think of any and all provisions that might make sense in this community and from what we see in other communities. So there's certainly, you know, room for, you know, amending parts of the code, you know, where you guys see that. I just kind of want to touch base on that.
And the number of chicks, or chickens, you were saying that if we're only allowing 4, why would people sell? But if you buy chicks online, sometimes they show up. Because I thought there was something in there where you could have more than the 4 hens. You could have chicks, but you had to keep them for a certain amount of time. Maybe Bryce, if you got it in front of you, you could maybe clarify that. But there's a certain time frame that you got to keep those chicks before you can get rid of them. There would be your potential opportunity to sell. And then along with buying chicks online comes the, oops, you got a rooster, because you just don't know right away.
You know, I got a question about the free range. With more and more communities having chickens and stuff, now all of a sudden we get a ruling saying that, you know, that's cruel to chickens to keep them penned up, and they need to be let to run around. What happens to this ordinance then?
I would throw out there this. I've been told that it is cruel to tie your dog up outside, that they should be able to run free. And state law doesn't permit that. And dogs shouldn't run free, nor should cats. They're going to get hit potentially and among a whole bunch of other things. We won't even go into that. This is about chickens. But that would be my answer to that. It's nobody wants to have a whole bunch of chickens running around their yard if in fact those people don't want chickens. That would be my answer to that, I guess.
Yes.
Hey, Bryce, were you able to find anything about what Bob was mentioning with chicks? I didn't catch that part, and I'm just curious what that would be in reference to.
Yeah, I don't see anything specific. I found something about the structure that chicks can be incubated, but I don't see any mention of, not to say it's not in there, but I'm not seeing that right now.
Yeah, it's lengthy. And as far as fines and stuff go, your last question, I don't have any clue with that. We're going to leave that in the capable hands of HAP, I think, to figure out if there's going to be an ordinance or has to be a way to enforce the ordinance. If there's not, then what's the point of having it?
Correct. And for people that don't know, who is HAP?
Oh, HAP is, Harold Wolfgram, our city attorney.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Nope.
Just for
If my first meeting was now, I would want to know what you're talking. Steve?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to wind down the conversation prematurely, but if the commission, you mentioned earlier, Mayor, that the commission could decide to make a recommendation to the council tonight, or they could just take it under advisement and bring it back to the next meeting. But if there is a sense that the commission decides that they are generally supportive of the idea, some of these elements that are being batted around, how do they play out? How is it worded? What about all the neighbors have to agree, and these kind of things could be sorted out and addressed. I think the biggest thing is going to be whether or not this body and ultimately the council wants to allow it. And then it can be framed the way everyone feels is most appropriate.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I will.
Mary makes a motion.
Saying,
I will make a motion to move forward with allowing the chickens in the city with regulations that need to be decided upon that we've kind of discussed here tonight.
And Alderman Riley seconds the motion.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Was
Yes,
there a
Franklin.
second? I was seconding. Oh.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman O'Reilly second, and
Okay,
then Franklin second again.
oh,
So we have 2 seconds, and that's great.
Sorry, no,
We'll
we
take
don't
2
need
seconds
seconds.
over one of
I just
nothing.
didn't catch the first
That's
one.
quite all right.
That's okay,
Absolutely. Any other discussion?
So just a question, this will come back to this, or it goes forward to?
Well, it
No, it'll come
depends
back-
upon how we vote.
yeah.
Right.
This affirmative, it comes
Here-
back?
Here's my intention, and Bryce, feel free to jump in as well. My intention is if this motion passes, we bring it back to this body for the next meeting, if that's what your desire is, and maybe highlight some of the specific points from the ordinance that have been batted around in the last couple of meetings, last month and this month, and take a look at the particulars and see if there's agreement on those or whether there needs to be some tweaking, but that type of thing, maybe highlight some of the key provisions of it.
So we would vote on those provisions, seriatim one at a time? What would be your process?
Potentially, yeah. I haven't really thought it through. This is not normal for us to come to this conclusion that we're going to do it like this. It's almost a la carte maybe, but you could decide from discussion what you wanted to include and what you wanted to maybe not include that's in there currently in the draft. For example, you could decide that you love the ordinance the way it is, but you don't want to have the requirement that says that they need all the abutting property owners to agree, maybe 75%, or maybe that's taken out entirely. You could do that with each element that you found potentially concerning.
And if I could just touch on that, yeah, I would agree that this could come back as another discussion item at the next meeting where we can kind of highlight some of the key features. The one thing that I would recommend to you, Steve, is to maybe just give an update to the Common Council that, the Plan Commission is generally favorable in moving forward. Now we're just kind of working out the details, but maybe just provide a quick synopsis of kind of what's been discussed.
That's a really good point, Bryce. I will do that. And yeah, the council did want to know within 90 days whether or not this was likely to happen. They wanted a report. And the general consensus of this body right now is that you'd like to see an ordinance going forth to the council for consideration. And so I will tell them that.
Does that take a vote, Steve, after the motion and second?
Oh, if this is approved, then if we haven't voted, yeah. I'm getting ahead of myself. We've been talking with that phrase, if.
So we're voting on the fact of us coming back next month and kind of ironing out all of the bumps.
Yeah,
Sort of,
the way I have it, and I'll probably watch the tape again, but is Mary's motion is to be supportive of the idea of having an ordinance to allow chickens with the regulations specifically to be worked out yet.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Oh, one no? More than one no? One no? Okay, thank you.
4 and 1. Thank you. Number 13, staff updates.
I don't think I really have anything at this moment of any great significance. Some of the same things are going along that we've been dealing with or trying to deal with, including staffing, but nothing particular to report tonight.
15, items for future agendas.
The only thing that I have currently is the specific implementation plan. If all the plans are ready to go prior to the next meeting, we will bring that forward for the mini golf course. And then the deadline for other items would be this Friday. So depending on if I receive any by Friday.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. Thank you for all your work also through these public hearings this evening. And I entertain a
No problem.
motion.
Thank you.
Yep, I entertain a motion to adjourn. So move Kim and Mary. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.